Hey folks, and welcome to another Storytime with Max. I think you probably know me, but if you don't, I'm Max Porter. I'm the writer, editor, lore keeper, board game designer, stream runner, various other things here at City State Entertainment, where we are working on the MMORPG, Camelot Unchained. So, today I'm going to be reading another story from our lore for the game, and this is the end of the becoming the Picts, Brood and the Picts story. So this is I read the first half of part 3 last week, and now I'm going to finish it up. So without further ado, actually I'm going to make sure, can you hear me clearly? Just going to wait for a confirmation of that. Oi. Okay, good. Hello, Foggy. Hello, Francis. So, last time, I'll catch us up to the story here. So, last time we read the story, King Brood clashed with another tribe of Picts, led by a queen who introduced herself as Ethne. They fought and were well matched, but managed to stop the fighting before too much damage was done. Brood and his warriors were heading home instead of continuing on to attack the invading Tuatha forces. However, in so doing, they were themselves attacked by those same Tuatha who were launching their attack unexpectedly and right at the worst possible moment for Brood and his Picts. So Ethne showed up and decided to help along with her warrior tribe. However, they are still outnumbered by the invaders. And Brood was just injured severely by a spear strike in his side. So, that's the catch-up. And here we go. And he and Ethne just decided that it would be best if they made their way to a clearing and gathered their forces together instead of being strung out through the forest. Alright, so here we go. The Becoming the Picts, Part 3, Part 2 of the reading. As his blade sang, Brood ignored the stabbing pain of his injury and whistled piercingly through his teeth. The sound cut through the storm, the clatter of his sword on hardened wood, and the grunts and groans of the wounded and dying in the dark forest. He altered the tone, summoning his warriors to him, and sought another ally with his mind. If nothing else, his efforts could give the rest of the village time to escape the invasion. He was dimly aware of his tattoos shifting, rippling into lightning zigzags and other angry, fearful symbols. Something was coming. He managed to break free of the melee, or the melee, leaving the more heavily armed soldiers struggling to chase him through the mud and roots while he sprinted to catch up with Ethne. The young king was panting with exertion and pain when he found the Pictish queen standing in the center of a glade, atop a low knoll, directing warriors with commanding motions of her bloody blade. As rain blew and pelted down in spurts and false starts, a white flash lit up the chaotic fight. All around the edges of the clearing, weapons gleamed and warriors spun as the fight raged on. Brood could see his own warriors fighting shoulder to shoulder with the other tribe, their tactics and styles meshing easily for the moment. However, Brood could also see a pair of warriors gesticulating wildly, standing just before Ethne and attempting to argue. They were injured, but in the bright flash, Brood recognized them through the water and blood streaking their faces. Mael and Nectin, wearing angry expressions. Grinding his teeth, he limped up the slight rise, getting close enough to hear their talk over the thunder. "You have no authority to command," Nectin shouted hoarsely, grasping the soaked hilt of his sword and swinging his shield for emphasis. "You cannot tell warriors of our tribe what to do." Mael joined in, her healer's hands busy repairing the wounds of those nearby. "My king commanded me to save your injured, but you are not the queen of my tribe. No more orders. We need not fight and die at the side of strangers." "Indeed, you must." Brood's command was quiet, but penetrated the little group with assurance. Nectin and Mael both glanced up, surprised, and Brood was gratified to see relief on their faces, not guilt. "It is time to set quarrels aside. The village is in danger, as are all our lands. We have to show our mettle and halt the enemy here. The invaders have used the confusion of the storm to play a few tricks on us, and their woodcraft has proved impressive. But let us now show them how the Picts can stand and fight." The vehemence of his words was punctuated by another flash and rumble. The storm was picking up force again, and he could feel the weight of its magic pressing down on him, full of power and unstoppable intention. Nectin opened his mouth to object, but was silenced as an arrow flew through the wind and rain, striking his shield with a hiss and a thwack. Ethne nodded in acknowledgement and returned to shouting orders. Brood turned to do the same, taking up a position atop the small rise. He saw knots of his warriors burst from the trees, fighting off the advancing Tuahadidanan. The difference was stark. As they emerged into the clearing, the enemy seamlessly formed solid, organized ranks, as each soldier knew their proper place and position. While the Picts fought fiercely, even joining forces as two tribes, they were scattered, confused. Their whirling, flashing blades did not cut in harmony, or with the precision and confidence that fighting off a larger force would require. The battle was intense. Brood quickly grew hoarse from shouting over the storm's fury as he tried to organize a defense from warriors unused to working together. Ethne and he both were covered in mud and blood as they had to run into battle over and over. Brood began to lose track of how many soldiers he'd cut down beneath his blade, or that Ethne had tackled and beaten. All the while the Veilstorm swirled, forming a malevolence. The clouds had come up fast, as if intentionally seeking them out. The flashes of lightning and crackling magic seemed malicious, as if adding to the chaos of the fight on purpose. No matter where he turned, there were more and more enemies. About to charge down the hill once more, Brood jerked as he heard Ethne cry out. He saw her leg punctured, run through by a spear. Another soldier hurried up the grassy slope to the hill between the two Pictish monarchs, eager to cut off her head. Brood ran, but knew he would be too late. He called out desperately, seeking help. Fortunately, one swifter than he was listening. Dressed, dove out of the sky like a bolt of lightning himself, slashing with beak and talon. Shouting, the Tuathan soldier struck back, knocking the bird away with a vicious blow. Wobbling, but still in flight, the falcon took off into the darkness. Shaking his head, the man turned back to where Ethne lay fallen, trying to recover. Loyal Dressed had given Brood the delay he needed. He leapt onto the man's back, heedless of his own wounds. There was a short, furious struggle as the enemy tried to wrestle the Pict off of him. Finally, Brood's fingers caught their practiced hold on the edges and cracks of the wooden armor. The king heaved and tossed the soldier away to slip and tumble down the hill. At the same moment, he saw Ethne twist and wriggle off the spear that had pinned her leg to the ground, only to counterattack with a swift cut that left her enemy reeling. Her eyes were wild, bloodshot. Brood felt a strange twinge in his tattoos. And still the Tuatha army kept coming. There were dead littering the battlefield now. Brood briefly saw Mael bending over some of them, but her power and skill were nearly expended. The young king rushed to Ethne's side and was struck by an arrow in the same moment. He felt the force of it all through his body, pain lancing him. Brood choked, falling to a knee, barely aware of the oncoming enemy as he bent over the rival queen. "Can you stand?" he shouted, desperate. "Can you fight?" Each word made the arrow wound in his side throb with pain, but he ignored it. The queen looked up at him, rainwater and blood reflecting off her face in the moonlight that still struggled through the howling storm. Her eyes still burned with energy, and she showed her teeth as she panted. He could smell her blood, the thick odor of iron mixing with the scent of rain, mud, sweat, and magic. Yet, her voice was strangely calm. Bones break. War paint runs. Wounds gush blood. It is the end, Brood. It is the end. She extended a hand toward her dropped sword, but Brood clutched her strong hand in his. Both their palms were cold and slick with wet. His tattoos flickered, shifting under the power of her words. As the storm's force reached a crescendo, he roared without thinking, letting the ancient magic speak through him. "And yet the Picts fight on until the end. Tribes, to me, painted ones, to me, and fight for us." Abandoning their scattered fights, the remainder of the two tribes came, some leaping and bounding, most limping and weak, to cluster near the top of the low hill. For a moment, the Tuatha did not pursue, instead gathering their ranks together once more for the final push. There were not a great many Picts left standing, and most of them were injured and weary. Still, they gathered on the hill and encircled the leaders of their two tribes, sword points outward, to defend them to the last. With their ranks gathered, the enemy charged up the hill, long spears reaching out with death on their tips. Ethne grinned up at Brood. "A good end, though not the one I would have chosen. You make a noble king, Brood Bride Mac Billy. Farewell." Hardened wood met steel as the final combat was joined. Covered in blood, dirt, and sweat, Brood felt his tattoos lose all semblance of control, flickering over his body in complete chaos, covering him in color and shapes, swirls within swirls. Brood raised his face to the storm and screamed his last challenge. Pain and suffering and hopes for himself and his people, all expiring in one climactic moment. He stood, pulling Ethne up with him, grasping the nearest shoulder of a Pictish warrior for support. Whether from pain or emotion, she shouted as well, howling upward. Something came down to meet them, the kiss of the malevolence on their bodies, covered in the marks of war. The power leapt down from the heavens, leaping from one to the next like lightning, yet not lightning. A magic not quite of this world. Pain spread through the Picts, and their painted skin glowed, burning through the night in a conflagration of change. They screamed, their voices mixing with the great pain and anger of the living storm. The glow of their painted skin burned brighter and brighter, while the invaders stumbled back, shielding their faces from the light and the chaotic magic. All the Picts atop the hill changed. Their war paint and the mud and the gore and the sweat fused upon them, burning with the power of the veil. Their second skins were forming, as Brood howled into the storm, his lungs refusing to give out. The enemy blinked as the glow vanished, leaving darkness and moonlight. The Tuahandidanan forces were left alone in the storm-tossed glade, clutching their swords and spears as they peered through the rain. Brood, Ethne, and all the Picts were gone. Their second skins, transformed by the storm, had shifted to match their background perfectly. They had faded, melting into the background like so many ghosts. Fear spread through the invaders' ranks. The Picts had truly learned their own way of war. They had become one with their land. Talorc coughed and cleared his throat, finding himself dry as he neared the end of the long recitation. Seated atop the old hill, his elder nodded approvingly. The young Pict had done well, and it was a good lesson for all the gathered children in the control of the second skin, as well as the history of their people. "Yes, indeed," said the old man. The invaders, confused, would push on toward Brood's village, only to be set on from the rear by an enemy they could not see nor sense coming. Such was the potency of their power. Amused, the ancient man scratched his white-bristled chin and glanced around at the rapt faces all around. As I said before, sometimes the best place to hide is right out in the open. And so, the vengeance we wrought upon them was terrible indeed. But that can't be the end of the story," cried one girl, her form melting from the tree trunk she had practiced mimicking. "What happened to Brood and Ethne?" The old man smiled knowingly. "Their love was forged forever in the fires of that battle. They brought the tribes together and won over all their people through many objections and arguments. Necton in particular had to wear the cloak of shame for a very long time." He punctuated that comment with a knowing wink. Their first child was a daughter, and she was born with the whorls and marks of her people upon her skin. The first true-born painted one of the Picts. Tullark cleared his throat, recovering his voice at last, and looked inquiringly at his elder. Receiving a nod, the boy declaimed an end to the story. They settled down, and, despite further wars and adventures, ruled wisely and well. More and more tribes eventually flocked to their banner, as the Picts became more and more united. Years later, they befriended Arthur. We were among the first folk to pledge loyalty to the great king, and became one of the foremost races in his realm. But that is another tale for another time. Tullark smiled, proud that he had maintained control of his second skin through the entire story. One I should be proud to tell sometime, grandfather. Thus ends the becoming story of Brood and the Picts. I hope you've enjoyed. I've certainly enjoyed reading it. Let's see. Join us tomorrow for an office stream in the morning and a programming stream with JB in the afternoon. I believe Mubot has put the schedule up in the chat, but I'm going to pop it up anyway. Again. So, there's the stream schedule. Hey there. And, let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it. So, again, thanks for joining me. Hope you had fun. And I will see you later.